right. All right, well, let's get started. Good morning, everybody. Boker Tov.
Boker Or.
Boker Tov, Boker Or. It means good morning, morning light. That's what we have today. Morning light in so many ways, which we're going to talk about. Thank you all for being here today, for being part of this very special program. Today, we're all going to continue our journey toward racial justice. And for making this journey possible, we want to thank Temple Sinai's Racial Justice Committee, chaired by Zach Gershon. Where is Zach? There's Zach. There's Zach. Everybody wave to Zach. To thank the committee and to Zach Gershon. We want to thank our Temple and Religious Schools educator, Carolyn Moore-Musso. Carolyn's with us. Thank you, Carolyn. And our Educational Governing Board members, to all of our teachers, to all of our teen assistants, and especially thank you to all of you, our students. Thank you. You know, this month is Black History Month. This month of February is Black History Month. So this is a time for us to celebrate the many, many achievements and contributions of Black people in America. It's our time to honor them, and that's what we're going to be doing in so many ways this month. Now, many of you also know, here come the kindergartners. Welcome, guys. Come on down, kindergartners. Welcome. You're just in time. Just in time. Make yourselves comfortable. Okay, you guys can spread down a little bit more if you want to. Plenty of room. All right. Okay. Yeah. Is everybody comfortable? Great, you're just in time, because many of you know that one of the most important values in Judaism, well, we're going to talk about two today, but one of the most important values in Judaism is that all human beings are created equal. Everybody is created equal. Every child, every woman, every man, every person on this earth is created in God's image. In God's image. And the Hebrew for that is B'Tselem Elohim. B'Tselem Elohim. So for Judaism to say that every person is created B'Tselem Elohim in God's image means that everyone on this earth is deserving of respect. Everyone is deserving of dignity. Each and every person has a right to freedom. Each and every person has a right to justice. And each and every person has a right to equality. Yes, that is something to affirm. That is something to applaud. This is one of our greatest Jewish values. This is how Judaism wants us to think about it. Yeah, let's applaud for that. And we can do it this way too, right? That every person is deserving of justice and freedom and equality. That's how Judaism wants us to think about it. That's what Judaism asks us to do. And that's what we're all going to experience today. Today we're all going to take this journey toward racial justice. And we're going to discover how we can be God's partner. How we can be God's partner in Tikkun Olam, that other great Jewish value that means helping to repair the world and to repair society and to make it better. How you and I can be a force for good in the world. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And to lead us on this sacred journey together, we are so very honored to welcome and introduce to you Dr. Lori Barker. Let's wave and say hi to Dr. Lori. So Dr. Lori, we have ways of applauding in the sanctuary. One way is American Sign Language, kudos. Another way is Sacred Pac-Man, we call it. And we have various ways to do that. Now let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Lori Barker as she leads us today. She is a psychology professor at Cal Poly Pomona. She received her bachelor's degree in psychology from Yale University, one of the best universities in America. And her PhD is in clinical psychology from UCLA, also one of the best universities in America. Dr. Barker is also a licensed clinical psychologist with a private practice in Riverside, California. So not too far from us. just down the freeway. Dr. Barker's primary areas of interest are multicultural competence, diversity and inclusion, anti-racism, and evidence-based strategies for teaching about cultural issues. Dr. Barker is also the co-author of a college textbook titled Multicultural Psychology: Understanding Our Diverse Communities, and she is also the editor and author of a book. I love the title of this book, and I can't wait to read it. She's the author of a book called Obama on Our Minds: The Impact of Obama on the Psyche of America. So Dr. Barker, we are so deeply honored to welcome you. Let's hear it for Dr. Lori Barker, everybody. Thank you. And Dr. Barker, I'm going to give you this microphone, just because it may be cleaner.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Thank you, Rabbi, for that wonderful introduction. And I love the values, right? Because those fit perfectly with what we're going to talk about today. So what does that say up there on the screen? I heard somebody read it before. Go ahead. What does that say?
Kids can change the world.
Absolutely. Kids can change the world. Can we all say that together? You ready? As loud as you can. Ready?
Kids can change the world.
Absolutely. Exactly. The other line says fighting for social justice, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So we probably have to start with understanding what social justice is. And we talked about technology and making sure it works.
Is that, let's see.
It was working earlier.
This is all turned down.
Yep. It doesn't want to.
Okay. Let's see, we can figure this out.
Actually, sometimes the easiest thing is to
Oh, just that's a good sound. Yeah, that's a good sound.
Yeah, that was a good sound. It's hard. Let's try one more thing. Sometimes the easiest thing is to turn it off
Oh, yeah.
and turn it back on. If not, we'll just do it the old-fashioned way. Yeah, all right. We're just going to do it the old-fashioned way.
Okay. Well, the other thing you're going to do here.
Yep, I can do it by hand. I'll just stand here. You guys can still see me? All right, so let's do it this way. So first we need to talk about, what does social justice mean? Social justice really means fairness, right? Fairness means treating everybody equally, right? Similar to the values that Rabbi just mentioned for all of us. But I'm sure as you guys walk around your everyday lives, you see that things aren't always equal. Now, how many of you have seen a homeless person? Right? We've all seen homeless people walking around. Well, that means they don't have a home. But some people do have a home. That means it's unequal. If some people have a home and some don't, that's not equal. I'm sure most of you go to pretty nice schools, right, where you have the latest textbooks, the latest technology, your classrooms are heated in winter, they have air conditioning in summer, and you feel pretty safe going to school. But you know that some kids don't feel safe going to school? Some kids don't have the latest textbooks. They don't have the latest technology. Their heating and their air conditioning doesn't always work. So that's also an inequality, that not every kid gets to go to a nice school. So when we see these inequalities, what social justice says is that we need to work to make things right. We need to make it work so that everybody has a home, so that everybody has a safe place to go to school, so that everybody has access to the resources that we need for a good, happy life. Other things that we need. What else do we need for a happy life? We need a job. Yes, what else do we need? You need love. Everybody needs love, right? Yes, I see a hand with no body back there. Yes, what else do we need for a happy life? Yes, we need food. We need clean water to drink. We need nice, clean clothes to wear. It's good that everybody have access to health care, to all of these things. So when we see it's not equal, it's good for us to fight so that those things are equal. And people who fight for social justice are called social activists. So when we say someone is a social activist, that means that someone who goes out And they have strategies, they have techniques that they use to try to make things equal for everybody. So in order to really talk about what I want to share with you today, I have some stories to tell you about kids who fought for social justice. And to understand what those kids did, we really need to go back to the early days of history in our country. And back in the beginning of our country, we had something called slavery. Yes, go ahead. Exactly. Martin Luther King was trying to save the world. Uh-huh. Very good. That's right. That's right. And I see the hands, and I wish I had time to get to all of them. Jackie Robinson, you guys know a lot of good Black history. Ruby Bridges, we're going to talk about Ruby Bridges. So I see all the hands. We're going to have time for questions when I get to the end, okay? So I love all the participation. Thank you, guys. We're going to have time for you guys to contribute more and have questions at the end, right? So we're going to talk about slavery first. So in the early days of our country, especially in the southern states, there were people who owned big farms called plantations. And what they would do is there would be people who would go across the ocean to Africa, and they would kidnap some of the Black African people. They would put them on ships and sail them over here to the United States, and they would force them to work without pay. And they would force them to work in very harsh, uncomfortable situations. So that's not a very pretty part of our history here in the United States. But a brighter part of our history is that slavery was eventually abolished. Now that's a big word, but you know what abolish means? It means, yeah, good, I see all the hands. Everybody who knows what abolish means, it means that slavery was made illegal. Exactly, it was illegal. So the slaves were set free, and now when they worked, they were supposed to get paid for it, right? So somebody mentioned Abraham Lincoln. And in 1865, Abraham Lincoln signed what was called the Emancipation Proclamation. That is a mouthful, but it was something he signed saying that the slaves should be freed. And following that, Congress passed the 13th Amendment of our Constitution. And that 13th Amendment also says that slaves are free, right? That it's illegal to own slaves in the United States. So that's a bright part of our history. But you know, there was another part of slavery that wasn't so great. During slavery, did you know that kids could not go to school? It was illegal for them to go to school, and it was illegal for them to learn how to read and write. And if they were caught, say that again? Exactly, it was only for white people, and if the Black children were caught reading or writing, they'd be punished very severely. But after slavery, Black children were allowed to go to school, but they had to go to separate schools. And just as I was talking about before, those schools were not as nice as the schools that the white kids got to go to. Often it was a one-room shack like you see there in the picture. They didn't have heating, they didn't have air conditioning. Often there was a dirt floor. Often they had to go to school with no books, no paper, no pencils. Can you imagine that? Many of them, their schools were far away from their homes, so they had to walk for miles and miles to get to school. So they got to go to school, but their schools were not the same as the schools that the white children were allowed to go to. But another bright spot in our history is that also became illegal, right? So when Black kids and white kids had to go to school separately, that was called segregation. But in 1954, the Supreme Court is the highest court in the United States, right? They're these judges that listen to cases and they rule on things, and when they rule on something, that becomes law in our country. So what they ruled in this case, Brown versus Board of Education, is they said it's not legal to have segregated schools. Black children and white children should be able to go to school together, right? That's what they said in Brown versus Board of Education. So some people were happy about that law, right? Especially the African American families. They said, yes, now our kids can go to good schools just like the white children do. But there were some people who also weren't so happy about that law, and they got angry and they said, no way. Exactly, like those angry people with angry faces in the pictures, right? Holding those signs saying, no way, we're not gonna let our children all go to school together. So some people were pretty angry about that law. But it was law. So what the government said is no, even though you don't want to, you still have to send your children to school together. And so in different states, they resisted that law in different ways. But there were brave kids, just like all of you, who said, you know, we're going to be the first ones. We're going to be brave, and we're going to integrate our schools. We're going to be the first Black ones to go to school. Do you have a question? Okay, we're going to save our questions for the end. Is that okay? So hang on to your question. Remember it. We're going to save it for the end. So these 9 young people, also, if you have a question, we're going to save them till the end, okay? These 9 teenagers, they were all between the ages of 15 and 17 in Little Rock, Arkansas. They decided they would be the ones to volunteer to integrate their high school, which was Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. So these 9 brave teenagers, we see some other pictures of them here, right? We see them studying together, they're posing for a picture together. They were brave enough. So their first day of school was September 4, and sorry, that got cut off there. It should say September 4, 1957. And their parents drove them to school, but you know what they saw when they drove up to Central High School? They saw a big, angry crowd of people. The people who were angry about integration, about having to send their kids to school together. And those people, right, you see the angry faces again, they were shouting at them and they were saying things like 2, 4, 6, 8, we ain't gonna integrate. They did not want to let those students into the school. In fact, the governor of Arkansas, he also did not want to integrate. His name was Governor Faubus. So he ordered some soldiers to go and block these 9 students from getting into Central High School. So that day they saw the soldiers, they saw the angry mob, and they realized we're not going to be able to get in. So they tried to sneak away, but you know what happened when they tried to sneak away? People saw them and started chasing them. And they were afraid, but thank goodness it was a blessing that they were able to run and they were able to get away to safety and go home. But they didn't get to go to school. So what Governor Faubus did is he took that to court. He and the school board in Little Rock took it to court, and they tried to stop it. They said, we don't want these kids going to school. But that judge said, no, it's the law in our land now. They have to be able to go to school. So that judge ordered for police officers to be at the school to now protect the Little Rock 9.
Like, see, dogs can't go to the same school.
That's right.
This dog can't go to like black dog school.
Well, we hope that they can. Right? So we hope that they'll be able to go to the same school. So this time the police officers were there to protect the students and to escort them in. And that was on September 23, 1957. But they didn't take them in the front. They tried to sneak them in, and they took them around to the back door. But again, there was an angry crowd outside, and they found out that the students made it inside the building, and they were mad. And you know what they did? They stormed the building, and they forced their way in, and they were looking for those 9 students. And the police officers realized, we're outnumbered by this crowd. We're going to have to get them out of here. So they took the students down to the basement where they had some cars ready in the basement garage. They put the students in. They told them, duck down, get real small and hide at the bottom so people won't see you. And they drove them out and took them again to safety so that they were not harmed. So can you imagine? They're just trying to go to school, and people don't want them to go to school. The very next day, President Eisenhower, who was the president of the United States at that time, he called each one of the Little Rock 9 and he told them, he said, I'm going to make sure you can get to school safely. So what President Eisenhower did is he sent the National Guard the next day to escort the Little Rock 9 into school. And this time they got to go up the front steps into the front door of the school. So they made it inside. And they started school. But it was not easy for them because some of their classmates, their schoolmates, did not want them to be there. So they bullied them. You guys all know what bullying is, right? So they got bullied. Kids tripped them, kicked them, spit on them, threw things at them, threatened them. So it was very difficult for them. Every single day of school, they were bullied. But there were acts of kindness. There were a few students who tried to help them out. So for example, there was a young man who would write notes to one of the Little Rock Nine. Her name was Melba Portillo. And he would write notes and secretly pass them to her to warn her when the other students were trying to harm her. So there were acts of kindness, people who did treat them nicely. They made it all the way, most of them, 8 out of the 9 made it through the whole school year. So that at the end of that year, the first African American student to graduate from Central High School, we'll get your questions at the end, okay? He graduated on May 27, 1958. But that fall, when the students were ready to go back to school again, Governor Faubus would not give up. Do you know what he did that fall? He closed all the high schools in Little Rock. He said, we're just not going to let anybody go to high school in Little Rock. So the high schools were closed for that whole school year. Some of the Little Rock Nine, they tried to be patient and they tried to wait, but they realized if they were going to finish high school, they were going to have to leave. And also, they were still in danger. There were people still threatening them. So most of them moved out of state so that they could finish high school elsewhere. One of those students who moved out of state was Terrence Roberts. And you know where he moved? He moved to right here in Southern California in Los Angeles, and he enrolled in Los Angeles High School and graduated from there. He then went on to Cal State LA for his bachelor's degree. He did his master's at UCLA, and then he did his PhD in the same field I am, clinical psychology at the University of Illinois. And then he moved back here to Southern California. Now, Dr. Roberts is special to me because he's actually a family friend of ours. He has a wife and 2 daughters, and I actually grew up as friends with his daughters. So his story is very special to me. Remember your questions and hang on to them. Dr. Roberts is still here. He was a professor for many years, but he retired. But he still does public speaking and consultation and still does social justice work. So the Little Rock Nine received many honors. They got an honor from President Clinton. They had a coin and a stamp and statues built about them for their bravery. Now, somebody mentioned Ruby Bridges, right? So you guys have heard that story before. She did, and you guys know this story already, so we're just going to review this story and refresh your memories about Ruby Bridges. Ruby was born in 1954, which is the same year that the Supreme Court passed Brown versus Education. So she was born in a small town in Mississippi where her parents worked as farmers. But when Ruby was 2, she and her family moved to New Orleans, Louisiana, because her parents were looking for better jobs. Now remember, just like in Little Rock, Arkansas, where people resisted integrating the schools, they were doing the same thing in Louisiana. So when Ruby started kindergarten, like some of you, right? My kindergartners in here, right? When Ruby was your age and she was in kindergarten, the schools in Louisiana were still segregated, meaning black kids and white kids still went to separate schools. So Ruby went to a kindergarten with all black children. But by that next year, the government again told Louisiana, you're going to have to integrate. So what Louisiana did, they said, you know what? We're going to make it as hard as we can for these kids to go to school. We're going to create a test, a really hard test. And we're going to say that only those kids who pass the test can go to the white schools. Well, you know who passed that test? Ruby passed that test, that's right, along with 5 other kids who passed the test, so they got permission to enroll in the white schools. But Ruby was the only one at her school. So on November 14, 1960, Ruby and her mom, along with 4 U.S. Marshals, drove up to her elementary school there in her neighborhood. It was called William Frantz Elementary School. But you know what they found again? Same thing as in Little Rock. There was a big, angry crowd outside that did not want Ruby to go to school. And again, they were yelling ugly names and things at her as she and her mom went into the school. Ruby spent that whole first day of school in the principal's office because the crowd was so unruly and chaotic outside. But parents started to pull their kids out of school. They're like, we don't want our kids going to school with her. And there was only one teacher who was willing to teach Ruby. So Ruby ended up in a first grade classroom. Where are my first graders? Over here. Ruby ended up in a first grade classroom all by herself. Just Ruby and Ms. Henry. Ms. Barbara Henry was the only teacher who agreed to teach Ruby. But you know what? Ruby never missed a day of school that whole year. Even though it was really hard for her, she had to bring her own lunch every day. She ate lunch by herself. Sometimes Ms. Henry was the only person who would play with her on the playground. But Ruby never missed a day of school. And gradually things got better. Again, there were acts of kindness. There were people, Ruby's parents suffered. They lost their jobs because they decided to send Ruby to that school. But there was someone who was kind and gave Ruby's dad a job. There was someone who was kind who provided all the cute little outfits you see Ruby wearing to go to school. So there were some nice people who treated her kindly, just like her teacher, Ms. Henry. She did the same thing. Things got better. Gradually, parents allowed their kids to go back to school. Some more African American kids came to school with Ruby, so she finished elementary school. She went on to an integrated high school there in New Orleans. As an adult, she got married. She had 4 sons, and she became a travel agent. And she also continued to work for social justice. In fact, she started a foundation called the Ruby Bridges Foundation. So she still goes around fighting for social justice with her foundation. She also received many honors. Yeah, save your question, remember it. There were several books written about her. Maybe some of you have read those books. She wrote 2 books herself and won an award for one of the books she wrote. Disney made a movie about her story. She also got to meet presidents. She got an award from President Clinton. Norman Rockwell, a famous artist, painted a picture of Ruby in her first day of school. And President Obama, when he was in the White House, he put that painting of her up on the wall in the White House while he was there. So there were many brave young people like the Little Rock Nine, like Ruby Bridges, that we know about because they're famous. But there are other children during the 1950s and 1960s who went to school that we don't know about, who were the brave kids that integrated their schools and their neighborhood. And one of those is Dr. Felicia Friendly Thomas. She lived in a small town in South Carolina, and she was the first African American kid to integrate her junior high school when she was in 6th grade in her small town in South Carolina. And she has a really interesting story that I'm actually not going to tell you. You know why? Because Dr. Thomas lives right here in Los Angeles, and she's also my very good friend, and I'm sure she would come here and tell you her story herself. Would you guys like that? So we're going to tell Mr. Gershon, and we're going to tell Miss Carolyn, right? We're going to say, hey, we want Dr. Felicia to come and tell her story herself. But my point is that these were kids just like all of you who were very brave, who fought for social justice, for things to be equal, right? So that all kids could go and have a good quality education. So when you sit in your classrooms today and you look around and you see kids of all different backgrounds, all different faiths, all different colors, you can thank people like Felicia Thomas, Terrence Roberts, Ruby Bridges, because they literally risked their lives so that you could all go to school together. So what did we say? We said kids can change the world. So I hope that these stories inspired you to know that you can do the same thing. Now you might be sitting here saying, but I can't do that. I don't even know how to do something like that. And it doesn't have to be about education. Or it doesn't even have to be about racial justice. Find something that you're excited about. Find something that you're passionate about. Maybe it's homelessness. Maybe it's healthcare. Maybe it's climate change, right? But find something. Maybe it's animal cruelty. Maybe it's about animals, right? Find something that you are excited about and do something about it. Talk to your parents. Talk to your friends. Talk to the adults here at the temple. Get them to help you figure out what you're passionate about and figure out a way to do something, to make a difference and make a change. I've put the picture of the cover of 2 books that maybe you can ask your parents to buy these books, or maybe you can ask your teachers or the adults here at the temple to buy these books, because these books take you through step by step how to figure out what you're passionate about, right? Whether it's homelessness, climate change, animal cruelty, education, whatever it is, and figure out the steps you can take to make a difference. Because kids can change the world. Should we all say it together again? You guys ready? Wait. Oh, wait, not yet. Let's all do it together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. All right, good. I love that. Thank you. Now I have time to take the hands. All right, let's check our time. Yes, we have time for hands. Okay. Oh, so many. I'll just start and I'll go from front to back. Yes, what's your question?
Harriet Tubman worked to fight slavery, and she never even lost one slave.
You are right. Harriet Tubman is another important person in Black history, in our country's history, because I hope you guys know Black history is everybody's history, right? It's part of our American history. Yes, go ahead. Yes, Martin Luther King is another important person who fought for social justice. Yes. Of my slideshow? What'd you see? You want me to go back? Okay, tell me when to stop. This one? It says whites refuse to integrate. Thank you for asking that. Oh, we won't go to school with Negroes. Negroes like an old-fashioned word for Black people, right? So back in those days, some people called Black people or African American people, they called them Negroes. Does that help? Okay. Yes, go ahead. Oh, yeah. Excuse me. So you heard me say that only 8 out of the 9 made it the whole year. He couldn't, I don't remember actually, I think it was a boy. But one of them could not take it, right? Can you imagine being bullied like that every single day? So it just got to be too much for one of them and he dropped out. Yes, I am. All right, go ahead, yes. She does, yes, go ahead. Yeah, unfortunately, when you see homeless people, a lot of them are Black or people of color. That's true. That was great. You were doing something for social justice when you handed out those packs to those homeless people. And go ahead. At your school? Oh, in your class, yeah. So not as many. Yeah, so not that many. So I'm moving closer because I'm older than you guys. My ears aren't as good as yours. So I'm moving closer so I can hear you. Yes, go ahead. Okay. Yes, close name to the president, Thomas Jefferson. All right, yes, go ahead. Well, a little bit, because it's old-fashioned, right? So for people of color, we choose the names that we think are most respectful. So for example, right now, it's more respectful to refer to a Black person as Black or African American, right? Or maybe from the country that they're from. Like if they're from somewhere in Africa, to refer to it by the country that they're from, or if they're from somewhere in the Caribbean, like if they're from Jamaica, to say they're Jamaican. So it's a little bit offensive to say Negro because nobody says that anymore, right? We have names that we feel are more respectful. So thank you, that was a great question. Did you have your hand up? Yeah, go ahead. What was it? Oh. Yeah, so you guys were curious why only 8 of the 9 made it, right? That's a pretty good percentage though, don't you think? That only one of them couldn't take, because that was me, I might have been out of there. I've been like, I'm not taking this anymore. Yes, go ahead. Yes, Frederick Douglass was a slave, and he ran away so that he could be free, and then he fought for other slaves to be free. Exactly. Very good. He went around giving very powerful speeches to try to get rid of slavery. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, so mob is just another word for crowd. So that's what that title meant. The angry mob meant the angry crowd, right? Like all those people who gathered who did not want the Little Rock Nine or did not want Ruby Bridges to go to school. Does that answer your question? All right, I'm going to start on this side. I have hands. Yes, go ahead. Are not white or they are white? Not white. Okay, so yeah, so actually what you're saying is some of you, when you look at your schools, like some people over here were saying, only I have one black kid, no black kid in my class. So even though the Supreme Court passed the case, and even though the Little Rock Nine, Ruby Bridges, Felicia Thomas, even though all of them worked so hard for integration, yeah, it's still not perfect, right? We still have some schools where they're mostly students of color, and we still have some schools where it's mostly kids who are white. So we made some progress, but maybe we still have a little bit of way to go, right? Yes, go ahead. Yeah, so you're best friends with a person of color? Yeah, so that's another way. That's social justice. If you make friends with somebody who's a different color or a different background or a different faith from you, that is social justice, right? Because you're trying to right a wrong. You are being friends with someone, and you learn a lot by being friends with people who are different from you. Like, do you know how I found out about your temple? How many of you know Dr. Jill Namiro? Any of you guys know Dr. Jill Namiro? She's my friend, right? So she's Jewish, I'm black. She's Jewish faith, right? I'm a different faith, but we're still very, very good friends, and we learn a lot from each other, right? Did I miss a hand in here somewhere? Yes, go ahead. To a slide? To which one? Okay, it's back farther from this one? This one, okay. Eliminate, very good. Eliminate is a synonym for abolished. That's very true. All right, how are we on time? I've got like 2 more minutes for a couple more questions. Yes, go ahead. Carver. George Washington Carver. Yes. Exactly. He was a scientist, and he studied peanuts and all these different products that you can make with peanuts. Very good. You remember that. Yes, he was also a farmer. That's right. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, so yeah, you get to play soccer with kids from different backgrounds. All right, I'm going to take one last question, and then we will be finished. Yes, go. And you guys will have opportunities, because in your classes, you guys are going to keep talking about this, and then when you come back for your final assembly, I'll still be here. So if some of you didn't get your questions answered, you can save them for later. Yes. So how did some of the slaves escape? Oh, well, what you don't see in the picture is that there were guards to guard the slaves. They called them an overseer. So what you can't see in that picture is that there's probably a man sitting on a horse that's got a whip in his hand. So there was always somebody watching them, which made it hard for them to run away. So yeah. Well, sometimes they did that. Right? Somebody mentioned Harriet Tubman, but more often what they would do is they would run away at night so nobody could see them. Okay? All right, thank you everybody very much for your questions.
Thank you, and let's thank you, a strong thank you to Dr. Barker for this courageous and inspiring stories. There we go, yes, thank you, Dr. Barker. And we're going to have an opportunity to share more with Dr. Barker, because in just a moment you all are going to head back to your classrooms and have a discussion with your classmates and your teacher. When you have that discussion, maybe you want to think about at the end of your discussion, maybe one thing that you all agree is really a powerful thing that you learned, that you're going to be learning today, that you just learned, or that you're going to learn in the classroom. And then we'll share that at the end, because Dr. Barker is going to stay with us. She has graciously agreed to stay with us for the rest of the day, and we're going to come back together at the end of the day, and maybe we'd love to hear one or two things in your classes that you shared that you find really inspiring, a way that you guys think that you can help to change the world. So thank you again to Dr. Barker. Cantor is going to be passing out now some song sheets, because Cantor has prepared a very inspiring song to go. Yeah, sure.
The name, I found it like right. So if there's a lost and found, you can put it. I'm betting somebody lost their last night.
Boker Tov, everybody. So, you can see you're about to get a double-sided sheet of paper. One is the song we're going to do at the end, and that's the Jewish song that we're going to do, the Hebrew song at the end. But the first song we're going to do is I actually am going to play it over my phone so you can all hear it, and I want you to pay attention to those lyrics. Raise your hand if you've ever heard the song "Lift Every Voice and Sing." You ever heard this song before? Some of you haven't. Some of you have. Okay. So it's a really wonderful song, and it's considered the Black national anthem in our country. And if you look at the lyrics, it's so important, and I think it stresses the history of Black people in this country, what they've gone through, and looking forward to the hope of a brighter future. I think that's something we can all relate to. In fact, if you look at the Israeli national anthem, Hatikva, it's about the hope, right? The hope that we have for a better, brighter future. So I'm going to play this over my phone. I want you to pay attention to the lyrics as we go through it. And I want you to listen. This is a really wonderful group called Committed. They're a Black a cappella group, and they have a really beautiful sound. So I want you to listen to this.
Lift every voice and sing, earth, heaven, ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies resound as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the light that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. March on till victory is won. Stoning the road we trod, the chastening rock felt in the days
What a moving song. Thank you, Cantor. What a moving and important song in Black History Month. If you saw the date, over 100 years old. So a big part of history that we are sharing in today, and you're going to continue to help for social justice and social activism as Dr. Barker is inspiring us to do. So just again to tell you the rest of the day, the schedule for the day, we've got recess till 11:05, everybody, till 11:05. Then you're going to be in your classrooms for an hour having the discussion based upon what Dr. Barker talked about today. Then we're going to come back into the sanctuary. We would love for you to share with Dr. Barker and with all of us what you've learned today. One thing you've learned, and maybe teachers, you can think of maybe a spokesperson in your class to share, and then more questions perhaps for Dr. Barker, and then a closing song.
I just want to point out, so the other song for later is on the other side of your sheets, so you can maybe leave them. When you leave, you can leave them in your seats and come back to where you were sitting before, so you can still have them.
All right, wonderful. We'll have a great discussions, everybody, a good recess. Teachers, if we could be back by at the latest 12:10, at the latest 12:10. All right, well, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. Our kindergartners are here. Our first graders are here. I see our second graders, our third graders, our fourth graders, our fifth graders, our sixth graders, our seventh graders. We are all here. Are we all here? Yes? Okay, great, great. Well, it sounds like you've had wonderful discussions in your classroom, and we know that Dr. Barker has also had a chance to visit some of the classrooms. So we would love to hear and have, as we talked about a little bit earlier, like one representative. In some cases, there are co-representatives from each class. If you'd like to, not everybody has to do this, but for those who do have a representative, to share something that you learned today that really touched your heart. So let's see. Why don't we start with the, and I know the kindergartners have a sign they're going to share. Why don't we start with the first graders? Maisie, you had something that sounded really, really neat. So Maisie, could you stand up and I'll hold the microphone, and will you tell everybody what you guys talked about?
Stand up. Don't judge people by how they look and what color they are, like laundry. Right. People aren't laundry. They're made in God's image. They're B'Tselem Elohim. We treat them all wonderfully, and we don't judge them by certain things appearance-wise. And what were you going to add to that, Owen? Don't judge a book by its cover.
Right, sure, yeah. We don't judge people by appearances. We judge people, well, we don't really judge people, but... Okay, well, that's some way that we can do that, right? How do people act? What's in their heart? Again, created B'Tselem Elohim. Everybody's in God's image, so we treat everybody with great respect and dignity. So thank you, first graders. Let's see, second graders. Our representative was Shiloh, right? Okay, sir, would you please stand up and let's share with everybody? And maybe we can, if you're comfortable, here, I'll hold the mic, and why don't we, if you can face everybody so we can all...
We do not treat them by the outside. We treat them by the inside and how they act. No matter what they look, we still treat them with respect by how they act. This, like Martin Luther King's speech.
Yeah, like Dr. King said in his speech, right? Judge them, yes.
I have
a dream, yes.
He said that he had a dream. He had a dream that his 4 children would grow up and not be judged by the color of their skin, but the content of how they act.
Wow, absolutely, Shiloh. That was wonderful. Yes, the content of their character. The content of the character is what we're looking for. We're looking for the heart and the mind and the soul. So this is great. So I love how you guys want to participate. We want to give time because Dr. Barker wants to share something else very special. So we're going to go from grade to grade. So thank you, guys. If you'll hold that thought, if we have time, we'll take it. So first grade, second grade, third. Did we have a rep from the... Oh, Madeline, yes. Madeline, what's something that you and your class learned today? Can we ask you if you're comfortable to stand up and we'll all share?
We learned that you can't give up seats to whites that just because they want you to, and We learned about Rosa Parks.
Oh, very good. You learned about Rosa Parks, yes, and on the bus, and that everybody deserves a seat. Yes, everybody is deserving of a seat. Absolutely. Thank you, third graders. Let's see, fourth graders. Oh, yeah, Juliana and Stella were going to share. So, well, how about
We learned that you should stand up for black people, and do you want to go? And we learned that white people have an advantage or have like a privilege, and not a lot of people like that privilege because they feel like everybody should be treated the exact same.
Right.
And we watched a video about how people like thought about it. Like the black people, there was someone that said that because she was like eating a taco because it was like part of her like culture, and people were like, "Ew, that's disgusting."
Wow. Treating her differently just because it was a little bit different what's the food that she preferred. Yes, yes. Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing that, guys. It sounded like you learned a lot. Thank you. Thank you, fourth graders. Fifth graders. Let's see. Quinn was going to represent for the class what you guys learned and talked about.
We learned to stand up for people who are being judged by their race or religion and stand up for them when they're being bullied.
Yes. Oh, wonderful. Yes. Standing up for people. Standing up for people. Absolutely. Standing up for justice and doing the right thing. Love it. Let's see. Sixth graders. Des was going to... Oh, great. You guys were together, so you're representing 6th and 7th. Okay, great, Des.
Well, we talked about anti-racism and how if someone doesn't have the same privilege as you, you can stand up and use your privilege to help them and get them that privilege.
Nice. So sharing privileges and standing up for people who don't have certain things that you have. Wonderful. Wow. Well, thank you all. Let's hear it for all of you for this discussion that you had and this sharing. Thank you for sharing that. Dr. Barker, yeah.
Sure, yes. Thank you, everybody. And I had a good time. I hope I made it to every class. I think I did, going around and listening to what you guys were talking about and looking at the activities that you were doing. And so the things that each of you just shared captured some of the themes that I heard as I went around and visited your classes. So yeah, I did want to highlight a couple of those things. One of those that you all were talking about was that idea of privilege, right? And that privilege means you have an unearned advantage, meaning there wasn't anything that you did to get that advantage. It's just society handed it to you for whatever reason. That's the way our society has been built. And some of you talked about feeling a little embarrassed or ashamed or guilty about that privilege, that you didn't like that. And one of the things I talked with a couple of the classes about is, you know, what you can do with that guilt. Rather than feeling bad about it, one thing you can recognize is that everybody has some sort of privilege at some time. Did you guys catch that? Everybody has privilege at some point. Everybody has an advantage. So what we were talking about today, what a lot of you talked about in your classes, was white privilege, meaning that just by being a white person here in the United States, there are certain advantages or certain perks that you get simply by being white. But that's not the only kind of privilege. There are other types of privilege. Another example is male privilege. That in our society, men get certain advantages that women don't have. Yes, go ahead. Interesting. I'd never heard that one about the pockets before, right? So why should that be? Why should men get bigger pockets than women? Yes. Right. Yeah, so in the past, women had to stay at home, right, and care for the home. It wasn't really acceptable for women to go out and work and have jobs. And even though that's improved, right, that women in our country now can get an education, they can go out, they can get jobs, we're still not completely equal. There's still some advantages. For example, if a man and a woman are doing the same job, they don't get paid equally. A lot of times the man is getting paid more than the woman. So we still have a little ways to go. That's an example of privilege. Another one is if you're able-bodied, right? If your arms and your legs work well, and your ears and your nose and your eyes all are working, that's a privilege to be able-bodied, right? Someone who's disabled is on the downside of privilege. So one thing I want you guys to remember is that you all are privileged at some point, meaning you are on the upside of power. And rather than feeling guilty about that or ashamed about that, you can use that to help somebody else. Today, the term you all were using is be an upstander, right? You can stand up for that person who's on the downside of privilege. Another word for that is ally. You can be an ally. You are the person in the privileged position. You have the power. You can stand up, you can speak up, and you can help people who are on the downside of privilege, right? So rather than being embarrassed about the power, use it. Use it to make a difference and help people. All right, I see some more hands. Yes, go ahead. Because they're more manly? Okay, yeah, that's one I still don't get. But thank you. All right. Yes, go ahead. Yes, so now we like to recognize that, right? That even if a woman stays home to take care of the kids in the household, that's still work. That is still valuable work for her to be doing. Yes. Yes, so there were days, and in some countries that's still the case, right? Where they have arranged marriages. We get to choose the people that we marry. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. So we're getting lots of comments about that, right? About things like male privilege. Who has a question? Like a question that you want to ask? You have one. Yes, go ahead. Mm-hmm. Yes, they were examples of very independent women. Yes, go ahead. So for capitalism, right, to make more sales. Yes. Okay, here we go. Did you guys hear the question? The question is, why is the N-word so offensive? Do you all know what the N-word is? And I'm going to say it. We're just going to have a safe space for a minute. We try not to say that word, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. The N-word is nigger, okay? And it's a derogatory word that meaning it's a bad name that mostly white people used to use to refer to black people, starting back in the slave times, but even after slavery was abolished, when, as we saw in the stories today, people were resisting things like integration. So when they were angry, like you saw the angry faces in there, when they wanted to bully black people and put black people down, they would use that word, right? So it was not a nice word. It was a nice word to try to make black people feel like they were less than, that they weren't equal, right? That they weren't smart, they weren't attractive, they didn't deserve to be treated equally. So that word was meant to tear them down and to make them feel bad about themselves. That's why it's not okay to use that word today. Because when it's used, it is used to hurt somebody's feelings. It's used to make them feel like they are not equal. Okay? So thank you for asking that question. Because yes, you'll hear people use it. Like, you know, if any of you are into hip hop, and then the hip hop music, you'll hear even black people use the term. But I'm telling you personally, from my perspective, that is not okay. Because my people worked really hard not to be called that name. So I am a person who's not in agreement with using it just for fun. So that's what I would like to encourage all of you not to use it. And if you hear somebody using it, that's an opportunity to be an upstander, to be an ally and let people know that that is not okay. All right, let me know when I'm almost out of time.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Barker, and thank you for that really important teaching. And it looks like Audrey might want to share something
Yes.
really quick.
How much time do I have?
Well, I think maybe 1 more minute or so.
All right,
yeah.
so I'm sorry we won't have time to get to all the hands, but go ahead. Here we go. Last question. Okay, the question is, how are black people black? Meaning, why am I darker than you? Right? Is that what you're asking? Well, I'm not a doctor, and I'm not that kind of scientist, but I can tell you it's because we have more of something in our skin that's called melanin. So there's something in our skin that's called melanin that results in us having darker skin. So if you see someone who's darker, it means they have more melanin in their skin. And if they're lighter or white, it means they have less melanin. So there's a scientific reason why we are darker. Yes, it actually means that we are more protected from sun. So it's not that we don't sunburn, we do, but it just takes a little bit longer for us to get sunburned. All right, thank you guys so much for your questions. So remember, my thought I want to leave you guys with, remember, kids can change the world. Each of you can do something, and a place to start is by being an upstander or being an ally, right? And I hope each of you has the courage to move beyond that and do even more, but that's a place to start, right? There's another saying, see something, do something. So if you see somebody being mistreated because they're different in some way, speak up, right? And do something. Use your power, use your privilege to help others. All right, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.
Oh, let's hear it for Dr. Barker. Thank you, Dr. Barker. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being with us today. You've given so much for us to think about and for a way for us to move forward and be a force for good. So why don't we, with our bodies, show Dr. Barker, too, how we can be an upstander. Let's all stand up together. And by using our bodies, we're going to experience the power that Dr. Barker says, the courage that each one of you has, the heroism inside each one of you, the strength each one of you has to make a difference and to be a force for good and be an upstander and an ally. So we're going to stand together. Cantor's going to lead us in a song that expresses this in Judaism about how we can be an upstander and an ally and a force for good. And I wonder if the kindergartners, because they've made a sign, kindergartners, can you come stand right up here and with your sign, and Miss Angela as Cantor sings? Thank you. Yes, we want you guys to be included too and to stand up and show your courage and your strength.
Let justice well up as waters, and righteousness as a mighty stream. Tzedek, tzedek tidov, justice, justice shall we pursue. Let justice well up as waters, and righteousness as a mighty stream. Tzedek, tzedek tidov, justice, justice shall we pursue. Teach me goodness and justice. justice well up as waters, and righteousness as a mighty stream. Tzedek, tzedek tirdof, justice, justice shall we pursue. Open the gates of righteousness, the skies pour down with righteousness. Let justice spring out of the earth as we search to find the way. Let us follow in the footsteps that were set before us. Let us learn together, and we will find our way. Let justice well up as waters, and righteousness as a mighty stream. Tzedek, tzedek tirdof, justice, justice shall we pursue. Let justice well up as waters, and righteousness as a mighty stream. Tzedek, tzedek tirdof, tzedek, tzedek tirdof, justice, justice shall we pursue.
Shavua Tov, everybody. Have a good week.
Thank you, Cantor. Thank you, everybody. Thank you all for being a force of goodness and justice in the world. Thank you for making the world better. Thank you.